Tonight, we ascend to one of the most unforgettable and alien worlds ever conceived in gaming. This is the complete tale of The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind, the groundbreaking 2002 epic from Bethesda Softworks that would forever redefine the scope and depth of open-world fantasy. In the year 2002, the landscape of video games was forever altered by the release of a title that would not merely entertain, but would transport its players to a world of such profound and alien beauty, such deep and intricate lore, that it would become a benchmark for the role-playing genre for decades to come. The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind, developed by Bethesda Softworks, invited us to step onto the shores of the island of Vvardenfell, a place unlike any other in fantasy. This was not a land of generic elves and dwarves and familiar forests and mountains. This was a place of giant towering mushrooms that served as trees, of vast, desolate plains of ash blown from a monstrous volcano, of cities built into the shells of extinct giant crabs, and of creatures that defied easy classification, from the gentle, floating netch to the vicious, screeching cliff racer. It was a land steeped in a history of betrayal and godhood, where the divine was not a distant concept, but a tangible presence, and where a stranger from a distant prison would be cast into the center of a prophecy thousands of years in the making. The story of Morrowind is an epic tale that stretches from the dawn of time to the end of gods, a narrative of such scope and depth that to understand it, we must begin not with the hero, but with the very creation of the world and the people who would come to define it. Long before the rise of the Empire of Tamriel, before the cataclysm at Red Mountain, the ancestors of the Dark Elves were a people known as the Chimera, the Changed Folk. They were originally a part of the Aldmer, the High Elves of the Somerset Isles, but they grew deeply discontent with the rigid, hierarchical, and stagnant society of their homeland. A prophet named Veloth emerged among them, a visionary who preached a new path, a path of struggle, exile, and enlightenment. He taught them to turn away from the worship of the Aedra, the ancestral gods who had spent their power to create the world and now slumbered, distant and impersonal. Instead, Veloth pointed them towards the Daedric princes, the dynamic, active, and often dangerous spirits of oblivion who represented change, testing, and the raw forces of reality. 3 of these princes became their special patrons: the good Daedra. Boethiah, the prince of plots, taught them the necessity of strength, of overthrowing unfit rulers, and of secret knowledge. Mephala, the prince of lies, murder, and sex, taught them the art of the secret murder, the weaving of plots, and the understanding of the deeper mysteries of life and death. And Azura, the Prince of Dawn and Dusk, the mother of the race, represented fate, prophecy, and beauty, and she served as their direct guide and patron. Led by Veloth, the Chimera undertook a great exodus, a punishing journey eastwards, across the mountains and into the harsh, promised land they would name Resdain, which we now know as Morrowind. It was a land that tested them at every turn, but it was theirs, a place where they could build a society based on their new, harsh, and beautiful principles. They formed clans based on shared values and strengths, which would over centuries crystallize into the great houses, and they built cities that reached for the strange sky, their architecture a reflection of their proud, ambitious, and now independent spirit. But they were not alone in Resdain. The land was already home to a people so alien in their thought and culture that to this day, their ultimate fate and motives remain the subject of intense debate and mystery. The Dwemer, the Deep Folk, or Dwarves, as they are commonly known, were a race of supreme rationalists and scientists, masters of logic, engineering, and a form of magic based on sound and vibration known as tonal architecture. They built not on the surface, but within the very bones of the earth, creating breathtaking subterranean cities of gleaming brass, intricate clockwork gears, steam-powered machinery, and automated servants known as animunculi. Their society was one of pure intellect, largely devoid of the spiritual passions and reverence for the gods that so defined the Chimera. The Dwemer denied the divinity of the Aedra, viewing the Aedra and Aedra not as deities to be worshipped, but as powerful, natural forces to be analyzed, understood, and ultimately mastered through reason and science. A tense and fragile peace existed between the two peoples, a cold war of ideologies fought not with armies, but with competing worldviews. The Chimera saw the Dwemer as arrogant, godless, and soulless, their achievements hollow without faith. The Dwemer saw the Chimera as superstitious, emotional, and bound by primitive fears, their spirituality a chain preventing true progress. They were two sides of a coin destined to clash, and the spark that would ignite the final conflict lay dormant, beating like a silent drum, deep beneath the volcanic heart of the land, Red Mountain. The leader of the Chimera in this fraught age was a warrior and statesman of immense charisma and resolve, Indoril Nerevar. He was named Hortator, a war leader elected by the Council of the Great Houses to unite them in times of dire crisis. Nerevar was more than just a general. He was a unifying figure, respected and loved for his courage, his wisdom, his deep piety, and his unwavering loyalty to the Velothi traditions and his people. His closest friend and most trusted military captain was Vorin Dagoth, the lord of House Dagoth, whose loyalty to Nerevar was absolute and brotherly. Nerevar's inner circle was completed by his wife, Almalexia, a queen of immense personal magnetism, political skill, and ambition, Sutha Sil, a brilliant but reclusive thinker and mage whose intellect rivaled that of the Dwemer, and who was fascinated by the fundamental laws and machinery of the universe, and Vivek, a poet, warrior, and philosopher who understood the hearts and minds of the common people like no other, able to inspire them with a word or a verse. This council guided the Chimera through a precarious existence, their eyes always watchful of their enigmatic Dwemer neighbors, their ears always listening for the whispers of their Daedric patrons. The peace was brittle, and it would take only one discovery to shatter it completely. That discovery came from the depths. In their endless delving, their relentless pursuit of knowledge and power, the Dwemer miners working deep beneath Red Mountain uncovered the greatest and most terrifying source of power in the known world, the heart of Lorkhan. Lorkhan is the missing god, the trickster spirit, the force of limitation who conceived the mortal plane. He convinced the original spirits, the Eta'ada, to sacrifice their power to create the world of Nirn. For this act of creation, or this grand trick depending on the telling, his divine form was shattered, and his heart, a crystallized fragment of pure divine energy, was cast down onto the world, landing where Red Mountain would later form. It was not merely an organ, it was a nexus of creation, a heart that still beat with the raw power to shape reality itself. The Dwemer's chief tonal architect, a genius named Kagranak, saw in the heart not an object of worship, but the ultimate power source, a key to unlocking mysteries he believed the gods themselves were hiding. He forged 3 sublime tools to safely interact with it. Sunder, a mighty rune-etched hammer designed to strike the heart and release its boundless energy. Keening, a precise, whistling blade meant to focus and channel that chaotic energy with pinpoint accuracy. And Wraithguard, a powerful enchanted gauntlet to shield the wielder from the heart's annihilating raw force. His goal, it is widely believed, was to power his great construct, the Numidium, a colossal brass golem, a god of pure logic that could, by its very nature, deny the existence of its enemies, unmaking them, making them simply cease to be. To Nerevar and the Chimera, this was the ultimate blasphemy, an act of such profound hubris that it threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. Tampering with the heart of a god, even a dead one, was to risk a catastrophe beyond comprehension. Nerevar, as Hortator, went to his friend, the Dwemer High King Dumak, whom the Dunmer called Dumak the Dwarf Orc, and pleaded with him to stop Kagranak's project. He argued that such power was not for mortals to wield, that it would bring only ruin. But Dumak, perhaps genuinely deceived by his own craft lord, or perhaps complicit in the endeavor, denied any knowledge of such a project. The lies and the escalating tension made war inevitable. The Chimera armies, united under Nerevar's Hortatorship, marched on Red Mountain. The Battle of Red Mountain was a cataclysm, a conflict that pitted Chimera magic, faith, and fury against Dwemer technology, logic, and their mechanical legions. But the true, decisive battle happened not on the bloody slopes, but within the mountain's sacred, hidden heart chamber. Nerevar, accompanied by his innermost circle Almalexia, Sotha-Sil, Vivek, and the ever-loyal Vorin Dagoth, ventured inside to confront Kagranak directly and seize the tools before the Dwemer could complete their work. What transpired in that chamber is the central, defining mystery of all Dunmer history, the truth shrouded by millennia of guilt, propaganda, and sorrow. The Tribunal Temple's official story, the one taught in its shrines and preached by its priests, is that Nerevar and his companions fought and killed both Kagranak and King Dumak in a fierce and heroic battle. With his dying breath, Nerevar, seeing the terrible power of the tools, made his 3 advisors swear a solemn oath upon their honor and their people that they would never, ever use the tools of Kagranak. They swore this oath to their dying leader, leaving the wounded Vorin Dagoth to guard the tools and the heart chamber. Nerevar and the others went to seek healing for their own grave wounds. When they returned, they found Dagoth maddened and corrupted by the heart's proximity and influence, refusing to relinquish the tools, claiming them for his own. A second, tragic fight ensued, and Dagoth was slain. Nerevar himself, the story goes, later succumbed to his own wounds from the initial battle, a tragic hero who gave his life to save his people from a terrible power. But the Ashlanders, the nomadic tribes who have always kept to the old ways, tell a different story, the story of the lost prophecy, a bitter echo on the wind. They whisper that after the battle, the temptation of the heart proved too great for Almalexia, Sotha-Sil, and Vivek. The allure of the power that had wiped out the Dwemer, the chance to become gods themselves, to guide their people with ultimate power, or perhaps simply the corrupting desire for that power for its own sake, overwhelmed them. They conspired together, and while Nerevar slept, recovering from his wounds, they murdered him, their Hortator, their friend, their queen's husband, in cold blood, to secure the tools for themselves. They then returned to the heart chamber, attacked the waiting loyal Vorin Dagoth, and left him for dead, taking the tools for their own use. This is the Ashlanders' truth, a story of cold-blooded betrayal, of kinstrife and greed that forever stained the soul of the Dunmer people. Whichever account is true, the outcome was the same. As the battle raged outside, Kagranak, in a final, desperate act, used his tools upon the heart in a last-ditch effort to activate the Numidium. In that single, inexplicable moment, the entire Dwemer race, every single man, woman, and child across the entire face of Nirn, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only their empty, silent cities and their dormant mechanical creations. The Chimera were victorious, but they had lost their beloved leader, and his most trusted companions were about to commit an act that would curse their people for all time. An act that would give birth to gods and a legend that would wait millennia for its fulfillment. The aftermath of the Battle of Red Mountain left Resdayn in a state of shock and disarray. The Dwemer were gone, erased from history in an instant, a mystery that would haunt scholars forever. The Chimera were the sole masters of the land, but they were leaderless, grieving the loss of Indoril Nerevar, their hortator and hero. In this power vacuum, authority naturally fell to his widow, Almalexia, and his two chief counselors, Sotha, Sil, and Vivek. They were now the de facto rulers of a united Resdayn, the three most powerful figures in a land suddenly absent of its ancient rivals. But the memory of the power they had witnessed beneath the mountain, the beating, world-changing heart of Lorkhan, was a constant, nagging presence in their minds. The tools of Kagranak were now in their possession, a direct link to the divine, a means to achieve what no mortal had ever achieved: true, lasting godhood. The official temple narrative states they were motivated by a noble desire to protect and guide their people with a power beyond mortality, to become the shepherds the Dunmer needed in a dangerous world, to prevent such a power from ever falling into the wrong hands again. The Ashlander account claims they were driven by simple, venal ambition, a thirst for power that led them to murder their friend. Whatever their true motivation, the result was the same. They resolved to break the oath they had sworn to Nerevar. They decided to use the tools. The ritual of apotheosis is shrouded in mystery, known only to the three who performed it, but its effects were world-shattering and immediate. Using Wraithguard to protect themselves from the heart's raw, annihilating force, they approached it. With Sunder, they struck it, a blow that resonated through the foundations of the world, a chime that echoed in the bones of every living thing in Resdayn. With Keening, they focused the torrent of creatia that spilled forth, channeling it into their very beings, rewriting their essence from mortal to divine. In that moment, they were transformed. They shed their mortality like an old skin and ascended, becoming the Almzivi, the living gods, the Tribunal. Almalexia became Mother Morrowind, the healer and protector, a goddess of compassion, mercy, and fierce martial strength, the beloved queen of her people. Sotha Sil became the Mage Lord, the secret keeper of mysteries, his mind expanding to comprehend the cosmic clockwork of the universe, becoming distant and inscrutable. Vivek became the warrior poet, the teacher and guardian, who understood both the blade and the pen, and the sacred spaces between them, a god who walked among his people, teaching through paradox and poetry. Their power was now immense, allowing them to perform miracles, shape the land, command the very elements, and live forever. But their act of theft did not go unnoticed. The Daedric Prince Azura, the patron of the Chimera, the spirit of prophecy who had guided them since the Exodus, who had loved them as a mother, was enraged. She had witnessed the betrayal of Nerevar, the breaking of the sacred oath, and the theft of divine power. In her infinite wrath, she laid a terrible and permanent curse upon the entire Chimera race. Their golden skin turned to ashen grey, their shining, elegant eyes ignited into the fiery, glowing red coals we see in the Dunmer today. The changed folk became the cursed folk, the Dark Elves, the Dunmer. This was to be an eternal mark of their leader's sin, a constant, visible reminder for all time of the betrayal at Red Mountain. But Azura was not finished. She proclaimed a prophecy, a promise and a warning that would echo through the ages. She declared that one day Nerevar would return. He would be reborn as the Nerevarine, the incarnate, and he would cast down the false gods, the Tribunal, and set right the wrongs of the past, restoring the Dunmer to their proper path, and ushering in a new age. With this curse and this promise hanging over them, the new gods and their newly darkened people began the arduous task of building their society, a society that would be forever divided between those who accepted the new gods and those who kept the old, true faith. The Tribunal moved with swift and decisive action to consolidate their power and shape the new society of the Dunmer. The Tribunal Temple was established as the official state religion, a complex, hierarchical, and powerful institution that venerated Almalexia, Sotha Sil, and Vivec as the one true divine triad. They did not simply erase the old Velothi traditions. Instead, they cleverly and strategically co-opted them. The good Daedra, Boethia, Mephala, and Azura were redefined not as enemies or false gods, but as the anticipations, sacred forerunners whose aspects and roles were perfectly fulfilled and superseded by the living Tribunal. Almalexia was the fulfillment of Boethiah's teaching and strength, Sotha Sil of Mephala's mystery, and Vivec of Azura's love and prophecy. This theological innovation allowed the temple to absorb the older faith while placing the three living gods at the absolute center of all worship, effectively neutering the old cults while paying them lip service. The temple's priests, its monks, and its militant arm, the Ordinator's fearsome guards in full face, symbol-adorned helmets spread across the land, enforcing doctrine and order, building magnificent temples in the cities of the great houses, and rooting out heresy. The political structure of the great houses also solidified in this new era, their roles becoming more defined under the watchful eyes of the gods. House Redoran, based in the western cities like Aldrin and Margan, became the guardians of the land and its traditions, its members defined by their honor, martial prowess, strict adherence to the law, and deep piety. They were the knights and nobles, the first line of defense. House Telvanni, of the northeastern coast, was a collection of powerful, ancient, and wildly ambitious wizard lords who pursued magical mastery with a ruthless individualism, building their great, organic mushroom towers in places like Sadrith Mora and Tel Brenora, and caring little for the affairs of others or the laws of the temple, so long as they were left to their studies. House Halalu, pragmatic and mercantile, looked outward from their base in the fertile south, in cities like Balmora and the capital, Mournhold, fostering trade and diplomacy with the rising powers of Tamriel, particularly the Empire of Cyrodiil. They were the merchants, the diplomats, the politicians. The lesser houses, like the decimated House Dagoth, were absorbed into the others or faded into obscurity. And on the fringes of this new society, dwelling in the ash wastes and the bitter coastlines, were the Ashlanders, the nomadic tribes who rejected the Tribunal entirely. They saw Almzivi for what they were, in their eyes, oathbreakers, kin-murderers, and false gods. They kept the old ways alive, venerating the Daedric princes directly, and preserving the true, unvarnished story of Nerevar's murder. They became the keepers of the lost prophecy, a living conscience for the Dunmer people, a constant, silent accusation wandering the edges of the world the Tribunal had built. For thousands of years, the Tribunal ruled Morrowind. Their reign was a golden age of power, stability, and divine wonder. They performed great miracles that cemented their status in the hearts and minds of their people. Almalexia famously fought the Akaviri invaders at the Battle of Old Marak, personally turning the tide and saving Morrowind from conquest, her sword shining with the light of the sun. Sotha Sil created the Clockwork City, a subterranean marvel of perfect mechanical order, a world of his own design, a city of gears and steam hidden from sight, where he contemplated the mysteries of the universe. Vivec wrote the 36 Lessons of Vivec, a deeply esoteric, paradoxical, and beautiful text that served as scripture, philosophical guide, and personal memoir. And he performed his most famous and visible miracle. He stopped the moon Bardau, a massive rock hurled by the mad Daedric prince Sheogorath, from crashing into his city, holding it suspended in the sky with his sheer will as a perpetual lesson to his people on the nature of divine love and the ever-present threat of its withdrawal. But this age of wonders was built on a fragile, secret, and ultimately unsustainable foundation. The power of the Tribunal was not self-sustaining. It was borrowed, and it slowly faded over time. To maintain their divinity, they were forced to periodically return to the heart of Lorkhan deep within Red Mountain, Using the tools of Kagrenak, they would perform a secret ritual to touch the heart and renew their divine energy, to drink from the well of power they had stolen. This practice continued for millennia, a secret pilgrimage that bound their divinity to the very source they had usurped. It was their greatest strength and their most profound vulnerability, a ticking clock that would one day run out, for they were not the only ones who remembered the power that lay sleeping beneath the mountain. A sleeper was about to awaken, and his dreams would poison the land. The golden age of the Tribunal stretched across 4 eras, a long summer of divine rule, but beneath the surface of this glorious epoch, a cancer was growing, a corruption born from the same source as the gods' power. The Tribunal, in their arrogance or perhaps their willful ignorance, had believed their old rival, Vorin Dagoth, slain in the immediate aftermath of Red Mountain. They had taken the tools and left him for dead, and for thousands of years, there was no sign of him. They were wrong. Dagoth had not been killed. When the Tribunal had attacked him, he had been deeply connected to the heart of Lorkhan, and in his wounded state, he had fallen into a deep coma-like sleep within the heart chamber itself. His body was preserved and sustained by the heart's boundless energy, and his mind, though dormant, began to slowly merge with the divine power, dreaming vast, ambitious dreams. He dreamt for millennia, and in his dreams, he built a new purpose, a grand and terrible vision for Morrowind. He saw the Tribunal not as gods, but as usurpers who had murdered his friend and stolen a power that should have been shared for the benefit of all the Dunmer. He fashioned himself Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, the dreamer who is awake, a title that signifies one who mistakes his own subjective dream for objective reality. A being of immense power and profound madness, he began to gather a new House Dagoth around him, built not on bloodline or tradition, but on shared corruption, fanatical belief in his vision, and a direct connection to the heart that he offered to his followers. In the late Third Era, he awoke. The being that stirred from that long slumber was no longer merely Vorin Dagoth, loyal captain and lord. He was Dagoth Ur, a divine entity in his own perception, powered directly by the heart of Lorkhan and utterly convinced of his own righteousness and the righteousness of his cause. His goal was simple, apocalyptic, and in his mind glorious: to drive the foreign empire and the false tribunal from Morrowind, and to elevate the Dunmer people through a forced communion with the heart, using a great construct he had dreamt into being, named Akolakan, the second Numidium, a new brass god of his own design. He would achieve this through the Blight, a supernatural disease and a corrosive mist that seeped from the depths of Red Mountain, an extension of his own will. This blight was more than a physical phenomenon. It was a spiritual poison, a corrosive force that twisted the land, creating the barren ashlands from once fertile plains and corrupted living beings, transforming them into his monstrous, loyal servants. The most terrifying and ingenious tool in his arsenal was Corpus, the divine disease. Dagoth Ur spread this sickness throughout Vvardenfell, not as a mere weapon of death, but as a tool of unnatural selection, a brutal refining process. Those infected would, in most cases, mutate horribly, their bodies swelling with grotesque, tumorous growths, their minds devolving into bestial insanity. These were the wretched souls often confined to places like the Corpusarium in the wizard Devaith Fire's tower, Telfire, pitiful creatures shunned by society. But Dagoth Ur believed Corpus was a blessing, a divine gift that granted immortality and strength, weeding out the weak and preparing the strong, the worthy, for his new order. From the most powerful and resilient of his corrupted followers, he bred the Ash Vampires, his lieutenants and brothers. These beings, like Dagoth Ur himself, were connected to the heart and could not be permanently killed as long as it beat. They would simply reform again and again. They were his generals, his disciples, sharing a portion of his immortality and power. Beyond the obvious monsters were the more insidious agents, the sleepers, men and mer whose minds were subtly invaded and rewritten through dreams sent by Dagoth Ur. These agents appeared normal, living and working within the settlements and guilds of Vvardenfell, but they were willing servants of the Sixth House, working in secret to sabotage, spy, spread the cult's influence, and recruit new members, a fifth column that made trust a rare and precious commodity in the growing shadow of the Ghost Fence. The Tribunal's response to this emerging threat was one of desperation and monumental effort. Recognizing the existential threat Dagoth Ur posed not just to their rule, but to all life on Vvardenfell, they combined their waning power to construct the Ghost Fence, a massive, shimmering, semi-transparent wall of magical energy that encircled Red Mountain. This barrier, maintained by the constant prayers, life force, and devotion of the temple's priests stationed at ministries along its length, was meant to contain the Blight and Dagoth Ur's forces within the interior of the island. It was a stunning achievement of divine magic, a visible, awe-inspiring testament to the Tribunal's power, but it was fundamentally a defensive measure. It was a confession that they could not defeat their old foe in open combat, that they could no longer safely reach the heart to renew their power. For whenever the Tribunal ventured into Red Mountain to attempt their renewal ritual, they found Dagoth Ur waiting for them. He had become too powerful within his own domain, his connection to the heart now stronger than theirs. He could repel them, wound them, deny them access to the very source of their divinity. With each failed attempt, the Tribunal grew weaker. Their miracles became less frequent, their public appearances more rare and orchestrated. Almalexia grew increasingly obsessed with her public image and her fading power, her once genuine benevolence curdling into a brittle vanity. Sotha Sil retreated further into his clockwork city, isolating himself from the world and its problems, perhaps seeking a mechanical solution to a spiritual crisis. Only Vivek remained visibly active, holding the Moon Bar Dao aloft through sheer force of will, and maintaining a facade of control through enigmatic poetry and public teachings. But even his power was a fading star, and the people began to whisper. The Blight and the rise of the Sixth House cult created an atmosphere of creeping dread across Vvardenfell. The people lived in the long shadow of the Ghost Fence, a constant, shimmering reminder of the terrible power growing just beyond the visible horizon. The temple preached faith in the Tribunal, but whispers of doubt began to circulate in the taverns and guild halls, in the corner clubs of Balmora and the plazas of Vivek City. The Ashlanders grew more vocal, their wise men and women declaring that this was the fulfillment of Azura's curse, that the false gods were being punished for their betrayal, and that the time of the Nerevarine was near. The great houses, meanwhile, bickered and maneuvered for position, their ancient rivalries intensified by the crisis. House Hlalu advocated for closer ties with the Empire, seeing the Imperial legions as a necessary shield and a source of stability in trade. House Redoran clung to tradition and martial pride, believing the Dunmer should solve their own problems without outside help, relying on their own strength and the waning power of the Tribunal. House Telvanni, as always, remained largely aloof, their wizard lords concerned only with their own arcane studies and the preservation of their personal power, viewing the Blight as a mere inconvenience unless it directly threatened their towers. Into this tinderbox of fear, prophecy, and political intrigue, a single spark was about to be cast. Far away, in the imperial prison of a distant land, a prisoner of no particular renown, whose past was a blank slate, was being singled out for a destiny they could not possibly imagine. Our narrative now shifts from the cosmic struggles of gods and the blighted dreams of a madman to a small, damp, and forgotten cell in the imperial city. Here, an unknown prisoner languishes, their crime, history, and even their name a mystery, even to themselves. This obscurity is the perfect beginning for a hero of prophecy, a blank slate upon which destiny can be written, a vessel to be filled by experience and choice. The prisoner's life is interrupted not by a pardon or a routine release, but by a summons from the highest authority in Tamriel. The Emperor, Uriel Septim VII, a man known for his shrewdness, his long reign, and his profound, often remarked upon faith in the ancient and inscrutable prophecies of the Elder Scrolls, has taken a personal interest in this one particular inmate. Under heavy guard, the prisoner is transported by ship, eastward across the Padomaic Ocean, past the coasts of Black Marsh and Morrowind, to the distant and mysterious island of Vvardenfell. The journey itself is a transition from the familiar, temperate world of Cyrodiil to the alien, a voyage into the unknown that fills the lungs with a different air. The journey ends at the small, swampy imperial port of Seyda-Neen. The first breath of Vvardenfell's air is a shock. It is thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of salt, decay, strange, fungal spores, and something else, something metallic and ancient. The sky is a different color, a hazy ochre. The trees are giant, whispering mushrooms, their caps forming a dense canopy. The wildlife is utterly bizarre. Floating, jellyfish-like netch drift serenely in the air, their tendrils dangling. Predatory, bipedal caguti stalk the plains, snorting and charging at intruders. And everywhere, the dreaded screeching cliff racers circle in the sky, a constant nuisance. The prisoner is processed by the slow, grinding machinery of the imperial bureaucracy in the Census and Excise Office, given a release paper that doubles as a character chart, a few gold coins, and a vague assignment to meet a man named Caius Casades in the city of Balmora. This is the player's introduction to the world, a masterclass in environmental storytelling and player agency. The journey to Balmora, whether on foot through the treacherous ash-choked Foyada Mamea, past ancient, silent Dwemer ruins, and the ever-present menace of cliff racers, or by paying for passage on the back of a giant, insect-like silt strider, whose haunting, melancholic calls echo across the landscape, is a tour through a world that feels ancient, lived in, and utterly believable in its strange, dreamlike logic. It is a world that does not cater to you. It exists on its own terms, and you must learn to survive within it. In Balmora, a city of stucco and cantilevered bridges built along the banks of the Odai River, the prisoner finds Caius Casades. He is a rugged, elderly man with a weathered face and a bare, modest house, looking more like a retired legionary scout than a spymaster. But appearances are deceiving. Casades is the Blade's commander for Vvardenfell, the head of the Emperor's elite intelligence network on the island. In his small, sparsely furnished house, surrounded by the mundane clutter of everyday life, he reveals the astonishing truth behind the prisoner's release. The Emperor, guided by his seers and the inscrutable, time-shattering visions of the Elder Scrolls themselves, believes that the Dunmer prophecies of the Incarnate, the Nerevarine, are beginning to unfold. The Blight, the weakening of the Tribunal, the rise of Dagoth Ur and his sixth house, all signs point to a coming convergence that could destabilize the entire empire. The Emperor's plan is audacious, dangerous, and utterly pragmatic. He wants to insert an imperial agent into the heart of this prophecy, to guide events to an outcome favorable to the Empire. The prisoner is to be that agent. The assignment is to investigate the Nerevarine cult, to learn the prophecies, and to see if it is possible to fulfill them, thereby placing a pro-imperial figure at the helm of the next era of Morrowind. He hands you a small purse of gold and tells you to join some guilds, make a name for yourself, and start asking questions. It is a beginning shrouded in mystery and vague direction, a seed planted in the ash. This begins a long and winding path of investigation, initiation, and deep immersion into the world. The prisoner, under Kasadi's distant but supportive guidance, begins to navigate the complex social and political landscape of Vvardenfell. To gain information, influence, and protection, they must join one or more of the great houses. Each offers a unique path and a distinct philosophy. The honorable and martial Redoran, where strength of arm and tradition are paramount. The mercantile and political Halalu, where gold and connections talk loudest, and pragmatism often overrides morality. Or the magically potent and politically savage Telvanni, where raw power and ruthless ambition are the only laws, and apprentices often succeed their masters by means of assassination. Simultaneously, the player interacts with the Imperial Guilds, the Fighters Guild, a band of mercenaries and guards with its own internal corruption and rivalries, the Mages Guild, a center of magical learning riven by its own petty squabbles and a deep-seated rivalry with the isolationist House Telvanni, and the Thieves Guild, operating in the shadows of the great cities, offering a different kind of power and wealth. Through these factions, the player learns the lay of the land, gains power and resources, builds a reputation, and forges alliances that will be crucial later. They explore ancient, haunted Daedric ruins, plunder dusty ancestral tombs filled with the ghosts of the past, and negotiate with the great and the powerful, from haughty Telvanni magisters to gruff Redoran counselors. But the core mission remains, a constant undercurrent to understand the Nerevarine Prophecies. This inevitably leads away from the settled cities and into the wilds, to the Ashlander tribes, the nomadic Dunmer who have never accepted the Tribunal's rule and who have kept the flame of the true faith burning for 3,000 years. They are the keepers of the original, unadulterated prophecies of Nerevar's return. Seeking out the Ashlander camps scattered across the most hostile and beautiful regions of Vvardenfell is a journey into the heart of the old Velothi culture, a way of life that has changed little since the Exodus. The Zainab, the Erebenimson, and the Ahemuza tribes are initially hostile, dismissive, and deeply suspicious of any outlander, especially one claiming to be, or investigating, the incarnate. They see the settled Dunmer as lost, their culture corrupted by the lies of the temple. But the most important tribe, the one with the most respected wise woman, is the Urshilaku, camped on the harsh, windswept, and freezing northern coast. Their wise woman, Nibani Maesa, is the most revered prophetess among all the Ashlanders. To even gain an audience with her, the prisoner must first prove their worth to the tribe's stern leader, Sul Matuul, by undertaking a task of courage and respect, such as retrieving the lost bow of a legendary ancestor from a nearby Daedric ruin or ancient tomb, a quest that tests both martial skill and reverence for the past. Upon success, Nibani Maesa, a woman whose eyes have seen countless seasons and whose voice carries the weight of ages, reveals the intricate, demanding details of the Nerevarine Prophecy. She speaks of the 7 trials, a rigid and unforgiving framework of destiny that must be fulfilled, not merely claimed. The prisoner must be born to a certain race under a certain star, which their ambiguous origins and the Emperor's deliberate interference have already arranged. They must be chosen by the great houses as Hortator, a war leader, and by the Ashlander tribes as Nerevarine, their spiritual champion. They must be tested on the Cavern of the Incarnate and recover Moon and Star, the ring of Nerevar himself. And finally, they must overcome the curse of Corpus, the divine disease, and be perfected by it, becoming immune to the blight and ageless. She confirms that the prisoner fits the initial signs, but warns, with a voice heavy with the memory of countless failures, that many have tried and failed before. These previous failures, the false incarnates, lie entombed within the Cavern of the Incarnate, a sacred and somber place. The path is now clear, but it is more fraught with peril than ever before. The Tribunal Temple, increasingly aware of the Emperor's agent and the stirrings of the Nerevarine cult, sees the prisoner as a dangerous heretic and a direct threat to the stability of Morrowind. Its ordinators, clad in their intimidating mask-like helmets, may attack on sight in the temple districts of Vivec City or Molag March. The great houses are suspicious of the player's growing influence and potentially conflicting allegiances. And all the while, the hidden agents of Dagoth Ur, the sleepers and the dreamers, work in the shadows, their influence spreading like a poison through the dreams of the people, undermining society from within. The prisoner is now caught in a complex web of conflicting forces, a tool of the Empire, a potential savior to the Ashlanders, a hated heretic to the Temple, and a direct threat to the god sleeping in the mountain. The first, investigative phase of the journey is over. The time for trials, for incarnation, for fulfilling the prophecy, one deliberate, dangerous step at a time, is at hand. With the prophecies laid bare by Nibani Maesa, the path from anonymous prisoner to potential Nerevarine transforms into a series of deliberate, dangerous, and politically complex steps. The 7 trials are not mere suggestions or simple quests. They are the rigid, unforgiving framework of destiny, and each must be authentically fulfilled for the incarnate to be recognized by the tribes and, more importantly, to survive the final, inevitable confrontation with Dagoth Ur. The first trials have already begun. Unconsciously, the prisoner was indeed born under certain signs, and, to uncertain parents, a condition of the prisoner's ambiguous origins and the Emperor's careful selection that now fits the prophecy perfectly. The next, and most demanding, steps are to be named Hortator by each of the 3 major houses, and to be named Nerevarine by each of the 4 major Ashlander tribes. This is not a single quest, but a sprawling campaign of political and martial maneuvering across the entire breadth of Vvardenfell, a process that will see the player become a central figure in Dunmer society. Becoming Hortator is a quest that requires the player to immerse themselves completely in the distinct culture and values of each great house. It is not enough to be a powerful warrior or a clever mage. One must understand what each house holds dear. For House Redoran, based in the great crabshell city of Aldrun, it requires proving one's honor, strength, and piety in the most traditional sense. This might involve solving a bitter, generations-old blood feud between 2 noble families, defending a remote settlement from a monstrous incursion of blighted creatures, or even defeating a proud Redoran champion in single, honorable combat to prove one's martial worth beyond any doubt. The Redoran value duty, tradition, and martial prowess above all else, and they are deeply, inherently skeptical of Outlanders, viewing them as untrustworthy and ignorant of the old ways. For House Halalu, in the commercial and political hub of Balmora, it is a matter of influence, trade, and cunning. The player must navigate a world of corrupt counselors, rival traders, and underworld figures, using bribes, persuasion, and occasionally discreet threats or thefts to outmaneuver rivals and secure the house's economic and political power. It is a game of shadows and favors, where a well-placed word can be more powerful than a swung sword. For House Telvanni, the most alien and dangerous of the houses, it is a pure test of sheer magical potency and ruthless ambition. Based in their fantastic, growing fungal towers like Tel Vos and Tel Branora, the player must rise through the ranks of the Wizard Lords by demonstrating superior arcane power, often by eliminating rival mages through accidents or duels, retrieving powerful and dangerous artifacts from forgotten ruins, and showing a complete disregard for the conventional morality and laws that constrain the other houses. To become Hortator for the Telvanni is to prove you are the most powerful and cunning mage among them, and that you deserve to lead because no one can stop you. Simultaneously, and often in tension with the Great House quests, the player must gain the support and recognition of the Ashlander tribes. This involves a different kind of effort, one based not on political power, but on earning the trust of a proud, insular, and deeply spiritual people. For the Ursulaku, it was the initial quest to gain audience with Nibani Maesa. For the Zainab, the largest and most powerful tribe, it might involve mediating a tense dispute with the imperial colonists at the nearby Fort Darius, a task requiring diplomacy and a deep understanding of both cultures. For the Erebenum Sun, a warlike and proud tribe, it could require seeking out and defeating a powerful, vengeful spirit that haunts their burial grounds, or driving a monstrous, blighted creature from their prime hunting grounds. For the Ahemusa, a tribe on the verge of cultural collapse and despair, it might mean recovering their lost tribe totem, a sacred object that restores their identity, their hope, and their connection to their ancestors. One by one, through great deeds that demonstrate respect for their ways and a commitment to their people, the councils of the great houses are convinced, the tribes are swayed, and the titles of Hortator and Nerevarine are bestowed. It is a process that transforms the player from an outsider, a suspect foreigner, into a central, unifying figure in Dunmer society. A figure who bridges the gap between the settled and the nomadic, the new faith and the old. With these hard-won titles secured, the next, most spiritually perilous and symbolically weighty trial awaits: the Cavern of the Incarnate. This sacred cave, hidden away in the rugged, beautiful region of Azura's coast, is the tomb of the previous false incarnates, those who tried and failed to walk this path before. Their skeletons line the walls, a silent and grim warning of the price of failure, a physical manifestation of the weight of the prophecy. Here, the player must meet with the spirits of these failed incarnates. Their ghosts are not hostile, but sorrowful, ethereal figures who offer what wisdom they can from beyond their failure. They speak of the dangers ahead, of the subtle machinations of the Tribunal, who have, in the past, manipulated events and even directly engineered the downfall of potential Nerevarines in order to protect their own rule and their secret. From them, the player receives Moon and Star, the fabled ring of Indoril Nerevar himself. This artifact is more than a powerful magic item. It is the ultimate test of incarnation, the final judge. Legend says, and the spirits confirm, that only the true Nerevarine can wear the ring without being struck dead by its power. To put it on is to gamble one's very life on the truth of the prophecy, on the authenticity of one's own incarnation. When the prisoner slips the simple, unadorned ring onto their finger, there is no explosion of light, no fanfare, no sudden death, only a quiet, profound acceptance. The ring fits, and it grants its power, marking the wearer as the true incarnate, recognized by the artifacts of the past and the ghosts of those who came before. The spirits acknowledge this, their sorrow mixed with a faint hope, and the trial is passed. The prisoner is no longer just a candidate. They are the incarnate, the reborn spirit of Nerevar, a fact now proven by the most ancient of tests. But one trial remains, the most frightening, physically transformative, and conceptually paradoxical of all: the curse of Corpus. To finally be immune to the blight and the diseases of Dagoth Ur, and to fulfill the prophecy's final, cryptic verse, the Nerevarine must contract Corpus and survive it. This is not a metaphorical test. It requires a deliberate and horrifying act of self-pollution, a journey into the most blighted areas, to a sixth house base like the Corpusarium at the base of Telfir, and to allow oneself to be infected by the disease, to let its foul, transformative essence enter one's body. The effects are immediate and vile: a sapping weakness, a deep fatigue, and the terrifying feeling of the beginning of physical degeneration, the body beginning to rebel against itself. The only hope lies with one of the most fascinating characters in Morrowind, Dagoth Ur, an ancient and incredibly powerful Telvanni wizard who dwells in the Tower of Telfir. Fire is a figure of immense knowledge and casual power, over 4,000 years old. a contemporary of the Tribunal who simply never cared for godhood. He has been studying Corpus for centuries, maintaining a hospice, the Corpusarium, for its victims within his tower, caring for them with a detached, scientific curiosity. He has a potential cure, or rather, a refinement. He has discovered that while his cure does not reverse the physical mutations of long-term sufferers, it does halt the disease's progress and, crucially, grants the beneficiary the supposed gifts of Corpus that Dagoth Ur promised: complete immunity to all other diseases and a form of agelessness while retaining their sanity and sense of self. Undergoing Dagoth Fire's experimental alchemical cure is a leap of faith into the hands of a mad genius. The process is intense and painful, a purging of the body's impurities while somehow locking in the disease's beneficial, transformative aspects. It is a battle fought within one's own cells. But it works. The Nerevarine emerges from Telfia not cured in the conventional sense, but perfected, refined. They are now immune to the blight, which means they can walk the halls of Red Mountain and the citadels of the 6th House completely unharmed, a unique advantage no other mortal possesses. They have achieved the agelessness that was one of Dagoth Ur's promised gifts, but without the accompanying madness, physical decay, and loss of self. They have overcome the ultimate weapon of their enemy and, in a stunning alchemical and spiritual feat, turned it into their greatest strength. The 7 trials are now complete. The Ashlanders and the great houses have given their allegiance. The Nerevarine is no longer a figure of prophecy, but a tangible, proven force in the world, a living legend whose identity has been tested and confirmed by every possible standard. The path to Red Mountain is now open. The final act is about to begin, and it requires reclaiming the very instruments that began this age of gods, and betrayal, the tools of Kagrenak. The path to defeating Dagoth Ur is not one that can be walked with sword and spell alone. His power is derived from, and protected by, the heart of Lorkhan itself. To truly defeat him, the heart's enchantments must be severed, and for that, the Nerevarine needs the same instruments the Tribunal used to achieve their divinity, and that Kagrenak used to erase his people. The tools of Kagrenak: Sunder, the hammer; Keening, the dagger; and Wraithguard, the gauntlet. These artifacts are not lying forgotten in a chest. They are fiercely guarded, scattered across Vvardenfell in the deepest and most dangerous strongholds of the 6th House. The quest to retrieve them is a direct, violent assault on the heart of Dagoth Ur's power, a declaration of war. The first step, surprisingly, involves an audience with a god. Vivek, the warrior poet, still holds court in his magnificent, cantoned city, a place held together by his will and the ever-present threat of the moon he holds suspended above it. The Nerevarine, now a recognized and powerful figure, a proven incarnate, gains an audience with the living god. The meeting is tense, filled with the weight of unspoken history and the knowledge that they both know the truth of the past. Vivek is pragmatic, a philosopher to the end. He knows his power is fading. He knows the Nerevarine Prophecy, and he understands that Dagoth Ur is a threat to all of Morrowind, not just the Tribunal. In a move of calculated necessity, he chooses to cooperate, to use the instrument of his downfall as the tool of his people's salvation. He reveals that he possesses Wraithguard. The original was destroyed millennia ago, during their early struggles with Dagoth Ur, but he has used his knowledge to forge a new one. However, the gauntlet is keyed to his own divine essence, and simply giving it to the Nerevarine would be instantly fatal. Instead, he performs a complex, draining ritual to transfer its attunement to the Nerevarine, a process that requires a significant portion of his own diminishing power. He gives the Nerevarine the newly attuned Wraithguard and the plans for what must be done. To defeat Dagoth Ur, the Nerevarine must enter the Heart Chamber, and while protected by Wraithguard, strike the heart of Lorkhan with sunder and keening, not to absorb its power, but to sever its connections, to destroy the enchantments that bind Dagoth Ur and the Tribunal to it, thereby destroying the source of the Sharmat's power. With Wraithguard secured and the cosmic plan in mind, the hunt for sunder and keening begins. These tools are held by two of Dagoth Ur's most powerful lieutenants, his Ash vampire brothers, within their respective, blighted citadels. The citadels of the Sixth House are not conventional forts. They are nightmarish, organic-looking structures of hardened ash and corrupted rock that seem to have grown like a cancer from the landscape, pulsating with a sickly, inner energy. The air within is thick with the blight, which would be instantly lethal to any other mortal. The halls are filled with the corrupted creatures of Dagoth Ur, fanatical dreamers, hidden sleepers, and monstrous, twisted corporous beasts. The Nerevarine, now immune to the blight thanks to the perfected corpus, can navigate these hellish places where no other could survive, a ghost in the machine of Dagoth Ur's domain. The journey to retrieve sunder leads to a citadel, a place of twisting, dark halls, whispering shadows, and the constant, psychic pressure of Dagoth Ur's influence. The Ash Vampire Guardian is a powerful sorcerer and warrior, a being who has drawn power from the heart for centuries. His form graceful yet monstrous, his power vast. The battle is fierce, a clash of magic and steel against a foe who cannot be truly killed as long as the heart beats. But within his own fortress, he can be defeated, his physical form dispersed for a time, long enough to claim his prize. From his remains, the Nerevarine claims sunder, the great, rune-etched hammer that can strike the heart of a god. It is a heavy, potent artifact, thrumming with latent, world-changing power. A similar, equally perilous quest must be undertaken to another blighted citadel to retrieve Keening. Its guardian is another Ash vampire, perhaps a master of stealth and speed, reflecting the nature of the blade itself. Keening is a delicate, almost fragile-looking dagger, but it sings with a deadly, high-pitched energy, the same energy that Kagrenak used to focus the heart's power with precision. Its edge is sharp enough to cut the threads of divinity itself. Now, with all three tools in hand, Wraithguard securely fitted to the hand, sunder heavy at the belt, and Keening singing softly in its sheath, the Nerevarine is armed for the final confrontation. The weight of history rests on this moment. These tools were used to create the gods of the Dunmer, and now they will be used to unmake a god and end the reign of others. The journey to Dagoth Ur's inner sanctum is not just a physical one, but a journey back to the beginning, to the source of all the tragedy, the betrayal, the hope, and the sorrow that has defined Morrowind for thousands of years. The final battle, not just for Vvardenfell, but for the very soul and future of the Dunmer people, is about to commence at the center of the world, in the heart of the Red Mountain. The approach to Red Mountain is a journey into a dying world, a landscape of pure desolation. The air grows thick with hot ash, and the blight storms howl with increased fury, as if the mountain itself senses its impending end and is raging against the dying of the light. The Ghost Fence, once a towering, majestic barrier of light, now flickers and wanes sporadically, its energy nearly spent, its purpose almost over. Passing through its failing energy, the Nerevarine enters the interior of the mountain's caldera, a hellish landscape of glowing lava flows, jagged obsidian, and the grotesque, pulsing structures of the Sixth House. The path is guarded by the most powerful of Dagoth Ur's servants, but the Nerevarine, armed with the tools of Kagrenak, the certainty of prophecy, and the strength forged through the trials, cuts through them. The journey leads ever downward, into the bowels of the mountain, retracing the steps that Indoril Nerevar and his companions took thousands of years before, a pilgrimage to the site of the original sin. Deep within the mountain lies the Heart Chamber, a vast, cavernous space that hums with immense, primordial power. At its center hangs the heart of Lorkhan, a raw, pulsing, and mesmerizing mass of divine energy, suspended in the air by unseen forces, the silent engine of so much history. And before it stands Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat. He is not a monster in the conventional sense, but a figure of tragic and terrible grandeur. He appears as a tall, graceful Dunmer, but with the face of a golden, stylized mask, and the power of the heart radiates from him in palpable waves. He does not greet the Nerevarine with mindless rage, but with a kind of weary, almost welcoming recognition. He acknowledges the Nerevarine as the incarnate, the reborn spirit of his old friend, Nerevar. In his twisted, dream-logic mind, this is a reunion, a chance to finally complete the work they began together. He speaks of his grand plan, his dream for a new Morrowind, free of the imperial yoke and the false tribunal, a land where the Dunmer, empowered and unified by the heart through him, would rise to dominate Tamriel, a new, glorious empire under his guidance. He calls this dream Akulakan, his own version of the Numidium, a second brass god that would make his vision a reality. He offers the Nerevarine a place at his side, to rule together, as they were meant to, as brothers, to finish what they started at the first battle of Red Mountain. It is the final great temptation, an offer of shared godhood, power, and a new world order, delivered with the sincerity of a madman who truly believes he is saving his people. To refuse is to choose battle, to reject his dream and assert the truth of the prophecy. The fight with Dagoth Ur is epic and surreal. He is a master of magic and illusion, summoning minions, disappearing and reappearing, and striking with the raw, untamed power of the heart itself. But the crucial understanding of this conflict is that he cannot be truly killed by conventional means. His life force is bound to the heart itself. He will simply reform, again and again, forever. The only way to win is to follow Vivek's instructions and enact Kagranak's original ritual, but in reverse, with a destructive purpose. Protected by Wraithguard, the Nerevarine must approach the beating heart. With Sunder, they must strike it, a blow that echoes like a divine thunderclap through the chamber, releasing a storm of chaotic energy. Then, with Keening, they must strike the heart again and again, focusing the wild energy not to absorb it, but to sever its connections, to unravel the enchantments that tether Dagoth Ur and the Tribunal to its power. With each strike, Dagoth Ur screams in pain and denial, his form wavering, his power flickering as his connection to his source is violently severed. The Nerevarine strikes again and again, Sunder and Keening working in deadly tandem, a drummer and a flautist playing a song of unmaking, until with a final, shattering, silent blow, the connections are completely severed. The heart of Lorkhan ceases its rhythmic beat. It hangs silent, dark, and inert in the air, its active power gone, though its physical form remains. Dagoth Ur, his source of power and immortality gone, feels his divine essence slip away. He speaks his last words, often a lament for his lost friend Nerevar and the beautiful, terrible dream that has now died with him. And then he dissolves into ash, his spirit finally released from millennia of corruption, obsession, and madness. The blight that has seeped from the mountain begins to recede immediately, like a tide going out. The corrupting influence of the sixth house vanishes, its sleepers and dreamers awakening from their trance, confused and free. The threat of Dagoth Ur is over. The primary prophecy is fulfilled. But the story is not quite finished. The destruction of the heart's enchantments has another, profound and immediate consequence. The Tribunal, Almalexia, Suthasil, and Vivek are suddenly and completely cut off from the source of their power. Their divinity, which they have renewed for thousands of years, is gone, severed at the root. They are, in an instant, mortal once more. They will not age and die immediately, for the residual energy of millennia of godhood lingers in them like a fading echo. But their time as living gods has effectively ended. The fall of Dagoth Ur means the fall of the Tribunal as well. The Nerevarine has fulfilled the prophecy, avenging the death of Nerevar and freeing the Dunmer people from the blight of the Sixth House. But in doing so, has also toppled the pillars of their society, the gods they have worshipped for eras. The world of Morrowind has been saved from immediate annihilation, but it has been irrevocably changed, set on a new, uncertain path. The aftermath of this victory, the story of the fallen gods, would be explored not in the main game, but in the expansion that followed, Tribunal, which would bring the story of Almalexia and Sutha Sil to its final, tragic conclusion. With Dagoth Ur defeated and the heart of Lorkhan silenced, the Nerevarines' work on Vvardenfell seems, on the surface, to be done. But the consequences of that victory ripple outward, and soon a new summons arrives, drawing the hero away from the ashen wastes of Vvardenfell to the mainland of Morrowind, to the ancient capital city of Mournhold, also known as Almalexia's city. The city, a place of grand plazas and towering walls, is under attack by a mysterious, mechanical horror, a great metallic golem known as the Imperfect. The Nerevarine travels to the mainland, arriving in a city that is a blend of classic Dunmer grandeur and modern imperial influence, now scarred by battle and fear. Upon dealing with this initial threat, the Nerevarine is granted an audience with Queen Berenzire and the God King, Almalexia herself. Mother Morrowind appears in all her glory, radiant and powerful. But to the Nerevarine's perceptive eyes, there is a frantic, unstable energy beneath her serene facade, a crack in the marble. She speaks of the attack, of her sorrow for her people, and of a greater threat. She claims that Sutha Sil, the Magus, has been silent from his clockwork city, and she fears he may be in danger, or worse, that he may be behind the attacks. She sends the Nerevarine to the clockwork city to investigate. The journey to Sutha Sil's hidden marvel is a trip into a realm of pure logic and mechanics, a stark contrast to the organic and spiritual world of Vvardenfell. The clockwork city is a vast, underground world of brass gears, spinning pistons, steam pipes, and mechanical beings, a perfect, ordered ecosystem built by a god's mind. But upon arrival, it is immediately clear that something is terribly wrong. The systems are failing, the gears are grinding to a halt, the mechanical inhabitants have become hostile, and the entire place is falling into disrepair and silence. Pushing deep into the heart of the city, the Nerevarine finds the ultimate truth. Sutha Sil is dead. He sits in his throne room, cold and lifeless, murdered by his own creation, the fabricant called the Imperfect. But the deeper truth is that he had simply given up, having lost his connection to the heart, seeing his great, perfect work falling into ruin, and understanding the futility and emptiness of his efforts. He had allowed himself to be destroyed, a quiet, tragic, and profoundly sad end for the thinker of the Tribunal, the god of mystery who found no mystery left worth solving. The Nerevarine returns to Mournhold to deliver the grim news to Almalexia, but her reaction is not one of grief or shock, but of cold, calculated fury. She reveals her true, shattered nature. The loss of her divinity has broken her mind completely. The mother and protector of Morrowind is gone, replaced by a vain, desperate, and power-hungry mortal, terrified of being forgotten, of being eclipsed by the Nerevarine, of fading into a mortal obscurity. She orchestrated the entire crisis. She sent the Imperfect to attack her own city, to make herself look like a hero and a savior in the eyes of her people once more. She had Sutha Sil killed out of jealousy, fear, and a twisted desire to be the last god standing. And now, She sees the Nerevarine, the living symbol of her downfall, the proof of her mortality, as the final obstacle to her reclaimed glory and adoration. The final confrontation of the Tribunal expansion is not against a foreign monster or a blighted horror, but against a fallen god in the halls of her own temple. Almalexia, armed with the mighty artifact Hopesfire, attacks the Nerevarine in a blind rage. The battle is fierce, personal, and deeply tragic. She is still incredibly powerful, a master warrior and sorceress with millennia of combat experience, now fueled solely by madness, spite, and a desperate need for validation. She fights not for her people, but for her own legacy, for the adoration she can no longer live without. The Nerevarine is forced to fight and kill the once goddess, the widow of Nerevar, in a bitter and deeply ironic conclusion to the story of the Tribunal. With her death, only Vivek remains of the three, and his fate is left uncertain, a mystery for the ages. The Nerevarine takes Almalexia's weapon, and is hailed as a hero once more in Mournhold, but it is a somber, hollow victory. The prophecy is complete, in the most final sense. The betrayers of Nerevar have been brought low, two by the Nerevarines' hand, and the third left to face a mortal future alone. The story of the gods of Morrowind has ended. The Nerevarines' destiny was to confront the gods of Morrowind, and having done so, the path ahead seemed open, a blank page. But fate, it seems, was not yet finished with the hero. A new call comes from the frigid north, from the island of Solstheim. Once a part of Skyrim, Solstheim was granted to Morrowind in tribute after the eruption of Red Mountain, and it is a land of two cultures. The Nordic settlers of the east, with their mead halls and sturdy longships, and the Skald villagers of the north, with their unique, animistic faith in the Allmaker, with the remnants of the Dunmer great houses clinging to the southern ashlands brought by the volcano. The East Empire Company has established a new trading post, Fort Frostmoth, and the Nerevarine is summoned to assist the Imperial colonists. Upon arrival, it becomes clear that Solstheim is in the grip of a primal terror. The werewolves, a curse thought to be largely mythical, are real, hunting in packs under the blood-red light of an eternal lunar eclipse, the Blood Moon. The Nerevarine is recruited by Captain Falx Carius, the ghostly, undead commander of Fort Frostmoth, to investigate the source of the werewolf curse. The trail leads across the snowy, pine-covered landscapes, from the raucous mead halls of the Nords to the quiet, sacred stones of the Skald. The Skald are a unique, isolated people who worship the Allmaker, a singular, pantheistic deity of nature, and their shaman explains that the natural balance of the island has been shattered. The beasts are enraged, the land is sick, and the blood moon hangs in the sky as an omen of a great hunt. The Skald believe that the Daedric prince Hircine, the lord of the hunt, is manifesting on Solstheim to conduct his ultimate, sacred hunt, and that the Nerevarine has been chosen as one of the prey. The investigation leads to a terrifying personal turn. The Nerevarine is infected with the werewolf curse. This begins a new internal journey, a struggle with a bestial nature within. The player can choose to embrace the curse, learning to transform and control the powerful wolf form to run with the pack, or to seek a cure from the Skald shaman, resisting the beast within. Regardless of the choice, the path ultimately leads to the Mortrag Glacier, where Hircine is preparing his hunt. The prince has chosen the greatest hunters and the greatest prey for his sport. The Nerevarine is forced to participate, navigating a deadly, ever-shifting maze within the glacier, fighting other chosen hunters and monstrous beasts. The final prey is none other than the Skald leader, Tharsten Heartfang himself, who has been transformed into a mighty werewolf, the ultimate prey. The Nerevarine must confront him in a pit at the center of the glacier, before the watching, anticipatory eyes of Hircine. Defeating the ultimate prey completes Hircine's hunt. The Daedric prince appears, pleased with the magnificent sport. He offers the Nerevarine a reward, a blessing, or the freedom to leave. But the story has a second, deeper layer, an optional but immensely challenging quest that speaks to the true heart of Solstheim, the coming of the Karstag, a legendary and massive frost giant king. In a quest that tests the limits of any hero, the Nerevarine can seek out and defeat Karstag in his icy castle, proving their strength against one of the most powerful and ancient creatures in the province. With the hunt over and the threats to the island quelled, the blood moon recedes, and the curse of the werewolves is broken. The Nerevarines' legend has now expanded beyond the shores of Morrowind to the frozen wastes of Solstheim, having faced and survived the machinations of yet another Daedric prince. Having confronted the legacy of gods, the blight of a heart, and the curse of a hunt, the Nerevarines' story is, at long last, complete. The hero who arrived as a prisoner departs as a myth, their future a mystery for the ages. The departure of the Nerevarine from the stage of Tamrielic history left a power vacuum and a world fundamentally, irrevocably altered. The immediate aftermath on Vvardenfell was a mixture of profound relief and deep, unsettling uncertainty. The blight was gone. The corrupting influence of the Sixth House had vanished overnight, its sleepers awakening with fragmented memories and its monstrous creatures collapsing into dust. The ghost fence, its purpose fulfilled, flickered and died completely, no longer requiring the constant devotional energy of the temple. The air around Red Mountain, for the first time in centuries, began to clear. But the pillars of Dunmer society had been shattered. The Tribunal was no more. Almalexia and Sotha-Sil were dead, and Vivek, having lost his divinity, disappeared from public view shortly after the Nerevarines' victory. The temple was thrown into a crisis of faith from which it would never truly recover. Without their living gods to provide miracles and guidance, the priesthood fractured into squabbling sects, with some clinging desperately to the old doctrines, others seeking new interpretations, and still others turning back to the veneration of the Daedric princes, the Anticipations, now free of the Tribunal's shadow. The political landscape was equally tumultuous. The great houses, once held in check by the overarching authority of the Tribunal, now jockeyed for supreme power in the new order. The election of a new Hortator, once a temporary wartime title, became a point of fierce contention for permanent leadership. House Redoran, with its martial strength and traditional values, saw a significant resurgence, positioning itself as the true heir to the old ways. House Halalu, closely tied to the now weakened empire, found its influence waning dramatically as imperial favor became a liability in the new nationalist climate. House Telvanni, as always, remained insular and powerful, its wizard lords largely unconcerned with who ruled as long as they were left to their own devices. The Ashlanders, long the keepers of the true prophecy, found their beliefs validated. They gained a new respect and a more prominent, though still often contested, voice in the affairs of Morrowind, though their integration into mainstream Dunmer society remained a slow and difficult process. The Empire of Tamriel watched these events with keen interest and no small amount of apprehension. Emperor Uriel Septim's gamble had paid off beyond his wildest expectations. His agent had not only neutralized the threat of Dagoth Ur, but had also dismantled the theocratic power structure of Morrowind, making the province more malleable to imperial control. However, this also unleashed unpredictable forces of Dunmer nationalism and instability. The eventual outcome was a complex and fragile balance, with imperial law and legions coexisting uneasily with the resurgent power of the great houses. The Nerevarine themselves became a figure of legend, then a ghost. After the events on Solstheim, they reportedly embarked on an expedition to the mysterious, unknown continent of Akavir, the Dragonland, and never returned. Their ultimate fate remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Fourth Era, But the events they set in motion would have catastrophic consequences decades later. With Vivek gone, the magical energy holding the moon Bardao, also called the Ministry of Truth, in place slowly dissipated. In the year 4E5, the immense rock finally crashed into Vivek city, utterly destroying it and causing the Red Mountain to erupt in a cataclysm known as the Red Year. This eruption devastated Vvardenfell, rendering it largely uninhabitable and forcing a mass exodus of Dunmer to the mainland and to Solstheim. The Argonians from Black Marsh, long enslaved by the Dunmer, seized the opportunity to invade a weakened southern Morrowind in what became known as the Accession War. The Dunmer people, once proud, powerful, and divinely guided, were brought to their knees, becoming a scattered, refugee people, their homeland in ashes, their gods dead or silent. The legacy of the Nerevarine, therefore, is deeply and profoundly ambiguous. They saved Morrowind from immediate, certain annihilation at the hands of Dagoth Ur, but in doing so, they set the stage for its eventual physical destruction and political collapse. They are both the savior and the unwitting architect of a nation's downfall, a hero whose hard-won victory contained the seeds of a future, even greater tragedy. A reminder that in the world of the Elder Scrolls, even prophecy fulfilled is no guarantee of a happy ending. The story of the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind is a story of profound depth, enduring tragedy, and breathtaking ambition. It is not a simple tale of a hero defeating a villain, but a complex, rich, and often contradictory interweaving of myth, history, and personal destiny. It explores timeless themes of betrayal and redemption, of faith and doubt, of the corrosive nature of absolute power and the heavy, often tragic price of immortality. At its heart, it is the story of a people, the Dunmer, and their eternal struggle to define themselves between the rigid traditions of the past, the comforting lies of the present, and the uncertain, often painful hope of the future. The world of Vvardenfell itself is a character, a land of alien beauty and ashen desolation that feels ancient, lived in, and utterly believable in its strange, dreamlike logic, a place that gets under your skin and stays there forever. The genius of Morrowind's narrative lies in its masterful execution of the prophecy. The Nerevarine is not a predestined hero in the traditional, passive sense. The player character earns the title through relentless effort, through meaningful choice, through enduring the trials and, crucially, by convincing the world, and perhaps themselves, that they are the incarnate. The prophecy is a framework, a set of conditions, but it is the player's actions, their decisions, their struggles that give it meaning and life. This creates a powerful, unparalleled sense of agency and immersion that few games have ever matched. The supporting cast, from the weary, paternal spymaster Caius Cosides to the proud, stern Ashlander Sul Matul, from the pragmatic, ancient genius Devaith Fear to the tragic, maddened, and strangely sympathetic Dagoth Ur, are all richly drawn, complex, and memorable characters, each representing a different facet of the world's complex, often dark philosophy. The fall of the Tribunal stands as one of the most poignant and morally ambiguous arcs in video game history. They began as mortals, as friends and companions, who sought to protect their people and became gods through a terrible, unforgivable sin. For millennia, they ruled as benevolent, if often stern and distant, deities, their reign a golden age of wonders. But their power was always a borrowed one, dependent on a source they could not truly control, and had to periodically replenish through a secret, vulnerable ritual. Their end, Almalexia, in a murderous, vain rage, Sothasil in quiet, despairing acceptance, Vivek in mysterious, poetic disappearance is a powerful and enduring lesson on the ultimate fragility of power built on a foundation of betrayal. In contrast, Dagoth Ur, the nominal villain, is a figure of twisted tragedy, a loyal friend driven mad by divine power and grief, whose love for his people became a destructive, corrupting force that nearly consumed them. There are no pure heroes or simple villains in this story, only flawed, compelling, and deeply human characters, both mortal and divine, caught in a cycle of history that they are desperate to break, for good or for ill. From the moment the prisoner steps off the boat in Seyda-Neen, the air thick with mystery, to the final, quiet moments after the gods have fallen and the hero has sailed into myth, Morrowind builds a sense of place and purpose that is unparalleled. It is a world that demands to be understood on its own terms, that rewards careful attention, thoughtful exploration, and a willingness to be lost and confused. Its story is not told through cinematic cutscenes, but through the environment, through the pages of books found on dusty shelves, through the layered, often cryptic dialogue of its inhabitants, and through the slow, deliberate, empowering accumulation of knowledge and personal power. It is a story that stays with you, not for its spectacle, but for its immense substance, for its willingness to engage with complex, difficult themes, and to trust the player to navigate them without a guiding hand. It is a masterpiece of world building and narrative, a dream of a game that, like the dreams of the Shamat, feels in the end more real, more meaningful, and more enduring than the waking world. And if you have enjoyed this journey through the ashes of Vvardenfell, through the rise and fall of gods and heroes, and wish to drift asleep to more tales of distant worlds and forgotten lore, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Your support helps us continue to craft these narratives and bring the stories you love to life. Thank you for listening, and rest well, Outlander. May your dreams be of peaceful shores and gentle ash falls. Good night.